It is another big week for investors. We've got a slew of earnings that are coming, plans for reopening the country, and oil in focus yet again. Let's talk about all of this. And joining us right now to do that is New York Times foreign affairs columnist Tom Friedman. His latest column, We Need Herd Immunity from Trump and the Coronavirus. Tom, good morning. It's good to see you.
Great to be with you, Becky.
You know, Tom, that follows up on a column that you wrote where you said leadership is not just more important than ever, but exponentially more important. What do you mean? What are you tracking? What are you seeing?
Well, in a crisis like this, Becky, I was interviewing one of the people I really think understands leadership best, my friend Dov Seidman, the founder of LRN. And the point Dov was making is that in a crisis like this, people naturally look to those in authority to lead them. You're uncertain, you're frightened. And what were the attributes they were looking for is what we were exploring. And one thing they certainly look for is leaders who trust their people with the truth, because that's really important. When I put all my hope and into you, I want to know that you are telling me the truth back. And leaders who trust their people with the truth are trusted more. They also look for leaders, I think, who are humble, who are ready to say, I don't know. Doug made the point that when you listen to Dr. Fauci and he says something, and you ask him something, he says, I don't know, or even like your previous guest, well, you listen to him more afterwards, and that issue of trust is so important. Doug was saying that trust is the only legal performance enhancing drug. And when there's trust in the room between you and a leader, between each other, more good things happen than bad things happen.
Hey, Tom, let's talk about how business leaders have been playing a role in this and how things have kind of been rolling out from that perspective, because we ran a new commercial that they put together earlier today just talking about a lot of the moves that corporate leaders have made. And it has been a highlight to see some of these leaders really stepping up and changing production, trying to make sure they're addressing this however they can, trying to take care of their people in downtimes. How do you think corporate America is responding to this, and how do you expect that to play out?
I think they've responded generally well. I think we have a lot to be proud of. I think the thing you have to keep in mind, though, Becky, is that fighting, we've described this as a war. President Trump has said, I'm a wartime president. And but this actually, when you're up in a war against nature, that's a different thing. So when we were fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we could outmobilize them. When we were fighting the Soviet Union, we could out-innovate and outspend them. But when you're up against Mother Nature, it's a very different fight. Because she's just chemistry, biology, and physics. So first of all, you have to be really humble about her, because if you disrespect her, she will kill you or someone you love. OK, number one. Number two, you have to be incredibly coordinated when you're dealing with her. And thirdly, you have to be rigorously science-based, because if she's just chemistry, biology, and physics, you better be as well. And I think the best companies and the administration, when it's been at its best, have really adopted that approach.
We had Dr. Scott Gottlieb on earlier this morning. He has an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today saying that America needs to really focus on producing a vaccine and producing it here in this country. There are a lot of manufacturers in other countries. His point is wherever that vaccine, that first vaccine is produced, or the ones immediately after that, what's probably going to happen is the local authorities will want to make sure they take care of their population first. It's an interesting dynamic. It does make you start thinking back to nationalism and kind of taking care of your own. We've already seen that play out in the United States to some extent when you had governors that were either fighting for PPE for their hospitals or fighting to make sure that they had ventilators on this. Do you think that he's right to have concerns about that?
Yeah, Becky, really, it's all a race for herd immunity. How do we get all our people immune? All right. And so there's two ways you get the herd immune. One is through a vaccine, and the other is through a process of exposure where people develop the natural immunity. And so in the vaccine race, I see that as a race between Moore's Law and COVID's Law. COVID's law is about the speed at which the exponential rate at which this virus spreads. And of course, Moore's law is about the speed and power of microchips and its exponential growth. And it's really a proxy for innovation. And we've always done well with Moore's law. Yeah, but I can tell you, the way I start my day now every morning, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I'm just a reporter. So I do reporting on what I see out there as the three big tests going on. One is the Swedish test, and the Swedes basically have said we're going to go for natural herd immunity. It's the book is still out. It's quite interesting, what's going on there. They've had more deaths, but they think about 25 to 30% of Stockholm now has herd immunity. And again, this is assuming that immunity works here, that you cannot, reacquire this infection afterwards, and we still don't know that. Second test is really Singapore, China, New York City. Suppress it. Try to break the chains of transmission, get it under control, and buy time for a vaccine or therapies. And the third approach, I would say, is Georgia, where people just say, I cannot stay home anymore. I have to work. I'm going to go out and take my chances. It's a less controlled process. So as a reporter, I'm watching all three of those while I listen to your show and see who's doing well on therapies and vaccines.
I mean, if you're at home waiting, and I guess that gets us to the point where we are in the New York City area, you're at home waiting for a cure or a vaccine. Vaccine's going to take a while. And it does beg the question of how long you can actually keep people locked up at home. And what happens in a place like New York City if you do open up again, particularly with the subways and with people really crowded on top of each other. It's different than being in rural Georgia.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, as you know, we did it on the show, and Dr. David Katz helped trigger this debate 5-6 weeks ago now. I really believe we have to find a way to harmonize our desire to save lives and livelihoods, because deaths of despair by crushing the economy will, in the end, kill so many more people than the virus itself. So I think we have to take very seriously how to harmonize those. But I do believe you have to do it in a very strategic and coordinated way if you're going to start to lift these closures. And so, I followed the work a lot of Amnon Shashua. He's an Israeli computer scientist who founded Mobileye. You probably had him on the phone to talk about that, the autonomous driving company that was bought by Intel. And what Amnon and his colleagues have been writing in Israel is that we need to take an inventory of the total number of beds, ICU units in the country. We need to strictly quarantine and sequester those most vulnerable to being killed by this disease, the elderly and those with immune complications. And then you phase in slowly that part of the population who has either already become immune, assuming the immunity still works, and who are, if they get the disease, are least likely to be killed by it and would experience it in mild or even asymptomatic ways, which by all the data so far seems to be at least 75% of the population. And you slowly feed them in and try to acquire herd immunity that way. But you got to be very strategic about both ends of that. Who is most likely not to be felled by this disease? Who is the most vulnerable? Put all your resources in protecting the most vulnerable, and then basically try to develop a kind of herd immunity that way. So that's the approach that they're debating there. It's kind of the Swedish approach. We'll just have to see which one wins in the field.
Hey, Tom, and this goes to the issue, though, of leadership that you were talking about earlier. Is there any state or municipality in the country that you think is approaching it in this strategic way? If you just try to separate those who are over 65 years old or those who are potentially more vulnerable, you'd have to put in place measures to get them food, to get them essentials and supplies, to have a network and system that can do that for them. I'm dealing with my own parents right now, and we can't even, with all of the resources that I think I have, I can't get that all organized. So it takes leadership and takes a lot of work. Is there a model out there in the U.S. that's interesting to you?
I don't see it yet, Andrew. I don't see something as strategic as the one Shashua was talking about in Israel, or even the middle model, the Singapore one. And the thing about people just don't understand that, because we've never experienced this kind of thing before. Mother Nature is just chemistry, biology, and physics. And you can't talk her up. You can't talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, I'm tired. I've been closed up for a month, or even that I've lost my job. She will do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And if you disrespect her, she will kill someone, you love or you. And so you just got to be serious about that. And I think we have not shown that kind of seriousness.